Amid the vast plains of Israel, there was a small town called Abel-Meholah, known for its fertile lands and dedicated farmers. Among them was Elisha, a simple and hard-working man whose life revolved around the fields he cultivated with such care. Every day, from dawn until sunset, Elisha plowed the land, sowed seeds, and tended to his crops, sustaining his family with sweat and dedication. On a serene morning, while the dew still sparkled on the olive leaves and the sun began to rise on the horizon, Elisha was leading his ox to the field. The air was fresh, and the rhythmic sound of the plow penetrated the tranquility of the dawn. Suddenly, an extraordinary vision caught his attention. In the sky, a fiery chariot descended swiftly, driven by radiant warriors. The intense brightness and the speed at which they approached were impressive, leaving no doubt that this was something uncommon. Elisha stopped abruptly, the plow ceasing its movement in the soil. His heart pounded rapidly, mixing fear and admiration. He knew, in some way, that he was witnessing something sacred. As the fiery chariot approached, emerging from a celestial whirlwind, there stood Elijah, the great prophet of God, mounted on the chariot, accompanied by his valiant warriors. Elisha's eyes shone with determination. He felt deep within his being that this moment was the call he had been waiting for, the divine opportunity to fulfill a greater purpose. Without hesitation, he left the plow by the field and ran towards Elijah, his heart full of faith and hope. With a firm yet reverent voice, Elisha proclaimed, "I am at your service. Lord, do not leave me to follow." His words echoed in the fresh morning air, laden with commitment and devotion. Elijah, recognizing Elisha's sincerity and readiness, smiled and placed his hand on his shoulder, blessing him. From that moment on, Elisha's life changed forever. He left behind the peaceful routine of the fields, embracing a journey of faith and responsibility. Under Elijah's guidance, Elisha began to learn God's ways, witnessing miracles and receiving teachings that would shape his character and strengthen his mission. Transitioning from farmer to prophet was not easy. Elisha faced challenges, doubts, and moments of trial. However, his determination and trust in God never wavered. Each step taken alongside Elijah reinforced his faith and prepared the ground for the miracles he would perform in the future. Elisha's call is a powerful reminder that when God calls us, we must be ready to respond with courage and obedience. Just as Elisha left everything behind to follow the divine will, we are inspired to recognize and heed God's invitations in our own lives, trusting that He will guide us on paths of purpose and blessing. Imagine the scene, the green fields of Abel-Meholah, with orderly rows of plants gently swaying in the morning breeze. The air is filled with the aroma of fresh earth and wildflowers. Elisha, dressed in simple farmer's clothes, is focused on his work, his muscles tense from the strength of the plow pulling the ox through the soft soil. Suddenly, the sky begins to fill with a bright and intense light. The sound of the plow is overshadowed by the thunder of the fiery chariot, descending at an almost unbelievable speed. The warriors, radiant in shining armor, seem to have emerged from a dream, bringing with them a powerful and majestic presence. Elisha, wide-eyed, feels a mixture of fear and reverence. Every detail of the chariot, from the flames dancing around the wheels to the brightness of the horses, is impressive and supernatural. When Elijah descends from the chariot, his imposing figure and wise gaze reflect the divine authority he carries. The moment is filled with emotion and meaning. Elisha's decision to immediately abandon his fields is not just a career change but a complete life transformation. He is willing to leave behind everything he knows and loves to follow God's call, fully trusting in divine direction. Elisha's call teaches us about the importance of recognizing and responding to God's will in our lives. Often, we can be so involved in our routines and responsibilities that we miss divine opportunities. However, like Elisha, we are invited to stay alert and ready to act when we feel the call, even if it means stepping out of our comfort zone. Elisha's story inspires us to have faith and courage to follow our divine purposes, knowing that with God by our side, we can face any challenge and perform great works for the good of humanity. If you are feeling motivated and inspired by this content, check if you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss more videos like this. We will bring a series of content with biblical teachings and inspiring stories that motivate us to continue and not give up. Let's continue with the story. After God's powerful call, Elisha established himself as a dedicated disciple of Elijah, the great prophet. Together, they traveled the lands of Israel, bringing divine messages, guiding the people, and performing miracles that demonstrated God's power. The relationship between master and disciple was deep, marked by mutual respect and an incessant pursuit of divine will. Elisha accompanied Elijah on various missions, each more challenging than the last. They visited villages ravaged by famine, confronted kings who strayed from God's path, and comforted those facing loss and suffering. In every situation, Elisha watched Elijah's actions closely, learning to discern God's voice and act with wisdom and compassion. On one such mission, they arrived in a city where drought was devastating the crops and the people lived in constant despair. Elijah prayed fervently, and in response to the people's faith, he sent rain that transformed the barren land into a green field. Elisha was amazed by the divine intervention, witnessing for the first time the true power of God operating through his master. Over the years, Elisha saw Elijah perform extraordinary miracles. There were times when Elijah calmed a furious storm, where the rain seemed never to stop, solely through his prayer. There were also occasions when Elijah fed multitudes with little food, demonstrating God's infinite provision. Each miracle reinforced Elisha's faith, showing him that with God, all things are possible. Elisha learned to pray fervently, trust in God's promises, and act courageously even in the face of adversity. Elijah's constant presence and the realization of these miracles built a solid foundation of faith and determination in him, preparing him for the challenges ahead. Time passed, and the day came when Elijah knew his earthly ministry was coming to an end. He felt it was time to pass the prophetic mantle to Elisha, his faithful disciple. Elisha's heart was full of anxiety and expectation, knowing that a crucial moment was about to occur. On a quiet afternoon, while walking together through the field, Elijah revealed to Elisha that his earthly journey was nearing its end. He knew that God would call him to heaven, leaving Elisha as his successor. Elisha felt a mix of sadness and joy, understanding the responsibility he was about to take on. The decisive moment occurred when they reached the Jordan River. Elijah, aware of what was to come, parted the river waters with his mantle, allowing them to cross to the opposite bank. As they walked side by side, a strong storm formed, enveloping them in intense winds and lightning. Suddenly, a whirlwind appeared, and a fiery chariot surrounded by flaming horses descended from the sky. God's presence was palpable, and Elisha watched with wide eyes as Elijah ascended to heaven in the fiery chariot. Elisha's heart raced, knowing that his mentor was being taken to the divine realm. In that sublime moment, as Elijah was lifted up, a mantle was cast upon Elisha. It was not just a symbol of authority, but a tangible manifestation of God's Spirit transferring to him. Elisha felt a powerful and restorative presence enveloping him, as if divine energy was flowing through his being. With this double portion of Elijah's spirit, Elisha was empowered to perform even greater miracles. The spiritual charge he received was not just an inheritance but a call to continue God's work with even more fervor and effectiveness. Elijah's ascension and the Spirit's transfer confirmed that Elisha was ready to lead the people with divine wisdom and power. Immediately after receiving the double portion of the Spirit, Elisha felt an inner transformation. His mind was clearer, his faith more unshakable, and his determination stronger than ever. He knew he was prepared to face any challenge, as he now possessed the same power he had witnessed in Elijah, multiplied. Elisha began to exercise his new authority, leading the people with wisdom that reflected divine guidance. He addressed social, economic, and spiritual problems with solutions inspired by God, gaining the respect and trust of everyone around him. The miracles he performed were even more impressive, from powerful healings to miraculous provisions in times of need. One of Elisha's first acts as Elijah's successor was to purify the waters of Jericho. The city was suffering from bitter and impure waters, making life and sustenance impossible. Following divine guidance, Elisha threw salt into the waters, instantly purifying them and restoring the city's habitability. This act not only saved the population but also symbolized the spiritual renewal Elisha brought. Another notable example was the resurrection of the Shunammite's son. When the boy died, the pain and despair overwhelmed the woman who had hosted Elisha. With unwavering faith, Elisha prayed to God and, extending his hands over the boy, brought him back to life. This miracle not only restored the boy's life, but also strengthened the community's faith in Elisha's divine leadership. The transition from Elijah to Elisha, marked by the double portion of the Spirit, is a powerful testimony to the continuous flow of leadership and divine power. Elisha, now strengthened and empowered, was ready to face new challenges and continue God's mission with even more vigor and effectiveness. His inspiring journey teaches us about the importance of being open to God's call, fully trusting in His power, and serving with humility and dedication. Elisha reminds us that with faith and obedience, we can receive strengths beyond our human capabilities, enabling us to perform great works for the good of all. His story invites us to recognize and embrace the gifts and responsibilities God grants us, trusting that He will guide and strengthen us every step of the way. Do you feel any similarity between your current moment and the story told? Do you feel you are experiencing something similar? Tell us how you feel. If you need a prayer or help, share a story of overcoming to inspire us and give us strength not to give up. Comment if you want to help someone or need help. In a small and peaceful town of Sarepta, located by the Sea of Galilee, lived a widow whose heart was heavy with sorrow and worry. She had faced the devastating loss of her only son, a pain that seemed unbearable. Additionally, the debts accumulated with creditors threatened to take her house, leaving her without means of support. Each day, uncertainty and fear grew, obscuring any trace of hope in her life. On a clear morning, as the widow walked slowly towards the harbor, carrying her few belongings, she spotted a distinct figure in the distance. It was Elisha, the prophet of God, whose reputation for miracles and wisdom had spread throughout the region. The widow's heart beat faster, mixing with a sense of relief and reverence. Elisha, noticing the anguish on the woman's face, approached with gentle steps. "May the peace of God be with you, lady," he said with a soft yet firm voice. The widow, with tears in her eyes, explained her desperate situation, the death of her son and the debts threatening her survival. Moved by compassion and divine guidance, Elisha offered to help. "Do not fear," he assured her, "for the Lord is with us and will provide the necessary provision for you to overcome this difficulty." To perform the miracle, Elisha asked the widow to gather all the empty jars she had. The woman, still incredulous, began to collect the bottles she had at home. Some were large, others small, but all were empty, reflecting the lack of resources she faced. With the jars in hand, Elisha instructed her to bring a vessel of oil. "Fill these jars with the oil you have," he said. The widow, although hesitant, trusted the prophet's word and began to pour the little oil she possessed into the jars. As the oil flowed from the jars, something extraordinary happened. The liquid began to multiply miraculously, filling each jar to overflow. The widow watched in amazement as her few resources transformed into unexpected abundance. The jars, which were once empty, were now full of oil, enough to sustain not only herself but also her children and family. Elisha watched closely, recognizing God's power operating in that moment. "The Lord is with you," he declared, "and He will supply all your needs." The miraculous provision not only saved the widow from imminent poverty, but also restored her hope and faith in God. With the multiplied oil, she could sell the excess, pay off her debts, and ensure her family's sustenance. Joy and gratitude filled her heart, and her faith in divine power was profoundly and significantly renewed. The story of the widow's oil multiplication quickly spread through the town, inspiring others to trust in God's provision even in the toughest times. The widow, now strengthened and full of hope, became a living testimony of God's faithfulness and Elisha's compassion. Imagine the scene: the widow's small, modest house, simple and unassuming, nestled among the stone houses of Sarepta. The aroma of fresh oil filled the air as she, with trembling hands, poured the golden liquid into the empty jars. Each drop seemed to carry renewed hope, a promise that God would not abandon her in her despair. Elisha, dressed in his humble prophet's attire, watched with eyes full of wisdom and compassion. The sun's light reflected on the jars, creating a display of sparkling brilliance symbolizing the manifestation of divine power. The sounds of the nearby sea and the soft murmur of the wind complemented the atmosphere of miracles unfolding before their eyes. The widow's oil multiplication is a powerful lesson about God's provision and the importance of unwavering faith. Even when resources seem scarce and circumstances insurmountable, God can perform miracles that transform hopelessness into abundance. The story teaches us to fully trust in divine guidance, act with obedience, and maintain faith even in the most challenging moments. Elisha, as an instrument of God, demonstrated that true provision comes from trusting the Lord and being willing to follow His commands with humility and faith. The widow, through her obedience and trust, experienced God's faithfulness in an extraordinary way, serving as an inspiration to all of us about the transformative power of faith and divine compassion. The story of the widow's oil multiplication invites us to reflect on our own faith and trust in God. Just like the widow, we often face moments of scarcity and despair, but with faith and obedience, we can witness miracles that transform our lives. May we learn to fully trust in the Lord, act with courage, and recognize God's hand working in our lives, bringing hope and provision in every circumstance. In ancient times, the lands of Israel and Syria were often scenes of tension and conflict. Among the Syrian leaders stood out Naaman, a respected and brave commander of the Syrian army. A man of great stature and strength, Naaman was known for his bravery in battles and his loyalty to the king of Syria. However, behind his imposing image lay a deep affliction. Naaman suffered from leprosy, a devastating disease that caused not only physical suffering but also social stigmatization for those who possessed it. Naaman's leprosy was not just a physical condition, it was a constant shadow over his life and reputation. Despite his status and military achievements, Naaman faced contempt and isolation imposed by society. The disease marked him, distancing him from his family, friends, and fellow soldiers. The pain and shame corroded his soul, making him desperately seek a cure that could restore not only his health but also his dignity. Desperate for relief, Naaman heard of a prophet in Israel who performed extraordinary miracles. Driven by hope and faith, he decided to leave his homeland and travel to Israel in search of healing. The journey was long and full of uncertainties, but Naaman's determination pushed him forward. Reaching the borders of Israel, he sought the help of Elisha, the renowned prophet known for his direct connection with God and his ability to perform powerful miracles. Naaman, accompanied by his closest servants, went to meet Elisha in the city of Damascus. Upon meeting the prophet, he humbly pleaded, "Please, my lord, come to my house. I am at your service." However, Elisha did not receive him personally. Instead, he sent a messenger with a clear message: "Go wash yourself in the Jordan River 7 times, and you will be healed." Elisha's instructions seemed simple, but for Naaman, laden with pride and expectations, they were a challenge. He expected a grand ritual, perhaps a banquet or ceremony in his honor, as recognition of his position and achievements. The idea of washing in an ordinary river, surrounded by simple men, seemed dishonorable and indignating to him. Naaman became furious, feeling insulted by the lack of protocol and the fact that he had to perform an act he considered vulgar. Despite his initial anger, Naaman could not ignore the possibility of healing. His servants, sensing his genuine suffering, tried to calm him and convince him to follow Elisha's instructions. "My lord," they said, "I know it is difficult to accept, but this is the word of the prophet. Who knows, God may do something for you." Reluctantly, Naaman decided to obey, recognizing that his condition could not be ignored forever. With reluctance, Naaman dipped himself in the Jordan River 7 times as Elisha had commanded. With each dip, he felt the cold water touch his skin, bringing momentary relief to his sores. On the 7th dip, something extraordinary happened. His leprosy disappeared completely. Naaman was healed. The transformation was not just physical. A new light shone in his eyes, reflecting the renewal of his soul and the gratitude for receiving God's grace. Naaman's healing not only restored his health, but also changed his perspective on life. Recognizing the power of the God of Israel, he returned to his country with a heart full of gratitude and reverence. In a gesture of devotion, Naaman asked for a personal testimony from Elisha, wishing to thank the prophet in a meaningful way. However, Elisha emphasized that true gratitude was in Naaman's changed heart and renewed faith. The miracle of Naaman's healing reverberated beyond Israel's borders. He became a living testimony that God's power transcends boundaries and nations, reaching even Israel's enemies. Naaman's story inspired many to recognize God's sovereignty and the importance of humility and obedience. Additionally, it highlighted Elisha's compassion and willingness to help, regardless of a person's origins or social status. Imagine the scene: Naaman, a man of great stature, marked by leprosy, arriving in Damascus with a loyal entourage. His military attire contrasts with his debilitated condition, symbolizing the duality of strength and vulnerability. Upon meeting Elisha, the prophet's simplicity contrasts with the grandeur Naaman expected, creating palpable tension. The journey to the Jordan River, Naaman's reluctance, and the sublime moment of healing are filled with emotion and meaning, reflecting the depth of faith and personal transformation. Naaman's healing is a powerful lesson on humility and faith. Despite his high position and grand expectations, Naaman learned that true healing and transformation come from obedience to God, even when it means setting aside pride and accepting simple instructions. The story teaches us that regardless of our condition or status, genuine faith and the willingness to follow divine will can lead to miracles and profound renewal. Naaman's story invites us to reflect on our own faith and humility journey. Often, we find ourselves in situations where our expectations and pride prevent us from accepting help or following simple paths God proposes. Like Naaman, we are called to set aside our ego, trust divine instructions, and open our hearts to the transformation that comes from obedience. May we learn from Naaman the importance of recognizing our vulnerabilities and the strength that lies in humility and unwavering faith in God. If you are enjoying this content, please like it to help YouTube continue recommending videos like this. It helps and motivates us to keep going. We appreciate every second, and may God bless you. Amid the green hills of Israel, there was a small town called Shunem, known for its hospitality and united communities. Among the inhabitants stood out a Shunammite woman, a woman of exemplary character and generous heart. When Elisha, the prophet of God, arrived in Shunem accompanied by his servant, the townspeople immediately recognized his spiritual importance and his ability to perform miracles. Recognizing Elisha's kindness and devotion, the Shunammite woman decided to do something special to honor him. The Shunammite woman had a nearby plot where she built a small house for Elisha and his servant during their visits to Shunem. Every day, she prepared fresh food, offering refuge and comfort to the prophet and his servant. Her hospitality did not go unnoticed. She was known for her generosity and care for visitors. This reciprocal and grateful relationship strengthened the bond between the Shunammite woman and Elisha, becoming an inspiring example of love and selfless service. At a certain point, the Shunammite woman expressed her desire to have a child. Observing her devotion and faith, Elisha prayed to God on her behalf. God answered her prayer, and the woman conceived and gave birth to a healthy boy. The joy that filled the Shunammite's house was immense. The boy grew strong and full of life, symbolizing divine blessing over the family and the Shunem community. However, the Shunammite's happiness would be shaken by an unexpected tragedy. One day, while the boy was playing in the field, a fatal fall occurred, resulting in the sudden death of the child. Pain and despair overwhelmed the woman and her family. The loss of her son was not just a physical wound, but also a deep emotional and spiritual pain. The Shunem community shared the sorrow, offering comfort and support to the Shunammite woman in her time of mourning. In the midst of her suffering, the Shunammite woman remembered Elisha and his previous kindness. Determined to seek help, she returned to the prophet's house, accompanied by her husband and daughter. With a heavy heart and renewed hope, she asked Elisha to intercede on behalf of her family, pleading for her son's life. "Please, my lord, my son is dead. Return and bring him back to life," she implored with tears in her eyes. Elisha, sensitive to the Shunammite woman's pain and faith, immediately stood up and accompanied her back to her house. He entered the room where the boy lay lifeless, surrounded by the family's sorrow. Sensing the urgency and seriousness of the situation, Elisha sought comfort and strength in God. He prayed fervently, asking for divine intervention to restore the boy's life. After the prayer, Elisha stretched out his hands over the boy, invoking God's power. Silence filled the air as everyone waited anxiously for a sign of life. Suddenly, the boy began to move. His eyes opened, and he took a deep breath, bringing life back to his family and the community. The resurrection of the boy was a miracle that not only restored the Shunammite family's joy but also strengthened the entire community's faith in God and in Elisha as his prophet. The news of the miracle quickly spread through Shunem and beyond. People from all over came to see the resurrected boy, witnessing divine power manifested through Elisha. Trust in Elisha's spiritual leadership increased significantly, consolidating his position as a respected and beloved spiritual leader. The story of the Shunammite's son resurrection became a living testimony of God's mercy and power to bring life where there was death. Imagine the scene: the Shunammite woman's house, once a refuge of joy and life, now enveloped in sadness and despair. The boy who once ran happily through the fields lay still, and the woman, consumed by pain, turns to Elisha in search of hope. Elisha's words echo in the silent room as he prays fervently, and the atmosphere fills with tense expectation. When the boy finally opens his eyes and breathes again, the room fills with tears of joy, tight hugs, and emotional thanksgivings. The sun's light seems to shine more brightly, symbolizing God's presence and the renewal of life. The Shunammite's son resurrection is a powerful lesson on unwavering faith and trust in God, even in the darkest moments. The story teaches us that regardless of the circumstances, hope and faith can bring unimaginable miracles. The Shunammite woman, through her faith and persistence, witnessed divine intervention that restored her son's life, reinforcing the belief that God is always present to hear and answer the prayers of those who sincerely seek Him. The narrative of the Shunammite's son resurrection invites us to reflect on our own faith and trust in God during times of adversity. Just like the Shunammite woman, we are called to seek divine help, act with faith, and believe in God's power to transform our lives. The story inspires us to maintain hope even in the face of the greatest losses, knowing that God has the power to bring life and renewal where there is death and despair. Jericho, one of the oldest and most historic cities in Israel, was facing a devastating crisis. Known for its imposing walls and the prosperity it once experienced, Jericho now suffered from bitter and uninhabitable waters. The city's main source, the Jordan River, had been contaminated by natural pollutants and waste from human activities, making the water unsuitable for drinking and agricultural use. The population, dependent on these waters for survival, faced severe difficulties. Sickness, desperate families, and the local economy in collapse were just some of the symptoms of this calamity. The situation in Jericho reached a critical point when the scarcity of potable water began causing serious health problems and fueling dissatisfaction among the residents. The walls of Jericho, symbols of security and stability, now seemed powerless against the crisis plaguing the city. In the midst of despair, the community leaders decided to seek divine help, believing that only a prophet of God could bring the necessary salvation. It was then that Elisha, the prophet of God and Elijah's successor, was called to intervene. Known for his powerful miracles and deep connection with the divine, Elisha arrived in Jericho accompanied by his servants. The city, already downtrodden, received the prophet with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Many had already lost faith, but Elisha's presence reignited a spark of hope in the hearts of the residents. After a fervent prayer, Elisha received a clear vision from God. The divine voice instructed him to purify Jericho's bitter waters. The instructions were simple but challenging. Elisha was to collect pure salt and throw it into the contaminated waters of the Jordan River. This symbolic act not only represented the physical purification of the waters, but also the spiritual restoration of the city. Elisha shared the instructions with Jericho's leaders, who, although initially reluctant, understood the gravity of the situation and the need to act with faith. Together, they organized a team to collect pure salt, a rare and valuable resource in the region. The people worked tirelessly, facing the scorching sun and the pressure of the crisis, to gather enough for the purification act. On the appointed day, a crowd gathered on the banks of the Jordan River, watching with anticipation as Elisha approached the water. With a determined look and unwavering faith, he held a large amount of salt in his hands. The entire city held its breath as he lifted the salt towards the sky, praying that God would bless this simple yet spiritually significant act. Elisha, with a solemn gesture, threw the salt into the bitter waters. The crowd watched in silence, waiting for a sign of divine intervention. Suddenly, the waters began to change. The bitter taste disappeared, replaced by a sense of freshness and purity. The transformation was immediate and visible. The water became clear and drinkable, reflecting the sunlight in a crystalline manner. The city of Jericho erupted in jubilation and gratitude. The people couldn't believe the miracle they were witnessing. Families rushed to drink the purified water, feeling immense relief. Farmers began to irrigate their lands, seeing their crops flourish again after years of scarcity. The local economy started to recover, and hope was restored in the hearts of the residents. Elisha watched the transformation with a satisfied smile, knowing he had fulfilled the divine will. The purification of the waters not only saved the city physically, but also symbolized the spiritual renewal he brought. Jericho, now clean and blessed, stood as a living testimony of God's power operating through his prophet. Imagine the scene, the sun shining brightly over Jericho's walls, reflecting off the newly purified Jordan River's crystal-clear waters. Elisha, dressed in his simple prophet's robes, stands out in the crowd, his figure conveying authority and peace. The salt, scattered in the waters, creates sparkling patterns that shimmer in the sunlight, symbolizing purity and renewal. People of all ages and backgrounds look at Elisha with reverence and renewed hope. Children run along the riverbanks, playing in the now safe waters, while farmers test the rejuvenated land with smiles of relief. The air is filled with the fragrance of newly blossomed flowers and the promise of better days. The purification of Jericho's waters is a powerful metaphor for spiritual restoration. Just as the waters became pure and drinkable, we are also called to purify our souls, leaving behind impurities and renewing our faith in God. The story teaches us that even in the most difficult crises, faith and obedience to divine instructions can bring miracles and profound transformations. Elisha, through his act of faith and obedience, showed that true purification comes from God and that with him, all things are possible. The city of Jericho, now blessed and prosperous, became an example for other communities, inspiring them to trust in divine provision and seek spiritual purification in their own lives. The story of Jericho's water purification invites us to reflect on our own faith and renewal journey. Often, We face turbulent waters in our lives, representing challenges and adversities. However, with unwavering faith and obedience to divine instructions, we can experience the purification and restoration that God promises. Just as Jericho was restored through Elisha's miracle, we are called to seek divine intervention in our own crises, trusting that God has the power to turn our difficulties into testimonies of His grace and power. May we learn from Elisha the importance of faith, obedience, and hope, knowing that with God by our side, we can overcome any challenge and experience true purification and renewal. During a severe famine that plagued the land of Israel, the crops had failed due to a combination of prolonged droughts and devastating plagues. Food reserves were dwindling rapidly, and the population faced moments of desperation and uncertainty. The streets of cities were empty, and the sound of despair echoed in homes where families struggled to survive with minimal resources. It was in this bleak scenario that faith and generosity were tested in an extraordinary way. Elisha, the prophet of God and Elijah's successor, deeply felt his people's suffering. Driven by compassion and divine guidance, he traveled through the villages and cities affected by the famine, offering prayers and counsel, trying to alleviate the suffering with the little he had. Amid his visits, he encountered a scene that would mark his mission in a unique and powerful way. On a sunny morning, Elisha walked through a small village by the river, where the scarcity of food was most evident. The houses were empty, and the air carried the scent of despair. It was then that he spotted a man kneeling by the roadside, holding a handful of flour and a bit of oil in his hands. The man, humble in appearance and dressed in simple clothes, looked at Elisha with eyes full of hope and reverence. "Prophet Elisha," the man said with a trembling voice, "I have little to offer, but my faith drives me to share what I have with you." Elisha, touched by the man's sincerity and courage, smiled with gratitude. "Do not worry, my friend. Your generosity will not be in vain. God sees what is in your heart." The man, despite his own needs, offered the small portion of flour and the little oil he possessed. He knew his offering was insignificant amid the community's scarcity, but his faith compelled him to act generously even in difficult times. Elisha took the ingredients offered by the man and, with a fervent prayer, invoked the divine presence. "Lord, in the name of your prophet Elisha, we ask that you multiply this food so that it may feed those in need." With calm and reverent gestures, Elisha distributed the flour and oil among the residents gathered in the village's central square. Anticipation hung in the air as everyone watched what seemed to be a simple act of sharing. Suddenly, something extraordinary happened. The flour and oil began to multiply miraculously, filling pots and baskets with an abundant amount of food. What was once a minimal portion now transformed into a generous feast, enough to feed hundreds of people. The crowd trembled with joy and gratitude. Tears of relief and happiness streamed down the people's faces as they collected the miraculous food now available for everyone. Children ran to grab bread, adults thanked from their hearts, and the atmosphere of despair was replaced by a feeling of renewal and hope. Elisha, observing the miracle, knew that this moment was a powerful demonstration of God's power operating through faith and generosity. The multiplication of the bread not only alleviated physical hunger, but also strengthened the community's faith in divine providence. Imagine the scene. A small village worn down by famine, with simple houses and residents exhausted from the daily struggle for survival. In the center, a square where Elisha and the man of faith stand out, representing hope amidst adversity. The pots of flour and the little oil in the man's hands seem insignificant, but as Elisha multiplies them, the transformation is visible and impactful. The aroma of freshly baked bread and the sound of laughter and lively conversations fill the air, replacing the heavy silence of hunger. People's hands, once outstretched in need, now hold baskets full of food, symbolizing the abundance that arises from faith and generosity. The miracle of the bread multiplication during the famine is a powerful lesson on the importance of faith and generosity. Even when resources seem scarce, the willingness to share what we have, even if it is little, can lead to extraordinary blessings. The story teaches us that with faith in God and generosity in our hearts, we can overcome the greatest challenges and see divine provision transform our lives in unimaginable ways. Elisha, through his act of faith and leadership, showed that true abundance comes from trusting in God and acting with kindness and generosity, even in times of crisis. The bread multiplication served as a living testimony of God's power to provide beyond our expectations, inspiring the community to maintain faith and hope in all circumstances. The narrative of the bread multiplication during the famine invites us to reflect on our own capacity for generosity and faith. Often, we encounter situations where our resources seem insufficient to help others, But Elisha and the man of faith story reminds us that even the smallest acts of generosity can result in great miracles when done with faith and sincerity. May we learn to trust in divine providence, share what we have with those in need, and keep the hope that, with God, we can turn challenges into opportunities for blessing and renewal. After Elijah's ascension to heaven in a fiery chariot, the nation of Israel was at a crucial point in its history. The people longed for spiritual leadership and divine guidance amidst ongoing challenges, both internal and external. It was in this scenario that Elisha, Elijah's faithful disciple, took up the prophetic mantle, determined to continue his mentor's legacy with unwavering faith and total dedication to serving God and the people. Elisha quickly consolidated his role as Israel's spiritual leader through a series of impressive miracles and profound teachings. His reputation as a prophet spread across the lands, attracting people from all walks of life seeking guidance and healing. Each miracle Elisha performed not only demonstrated God's power, but also reinforced his position as Elijah's worthy successor. Elisha performed numerous miracles that solidified his leadership and inspired a spiritual renewal in the hearts of Israel's people. Among the most notable were the purification of Jericho's waters, the resurrection of the Shunammite's son, and the healing of Naaman the Syrian. Each of these miracles not only solved immediate problems but also served as powerful testimonies of God's faithfulness and power working through Elisha. Elisha's journey as a spiritual leader was not without challenges. He faced opposition from unfaithful kings, false prophets, and corrupt leaders who sought to lead Israel away from God's path. However, with integrity and wisdom, Elisha navigated these adversities, always keeping his focus on divine will. Elisha not only addressed the spiritual needs of the common people, but also played a crucial role in guiding Israel's kings. He advised monarchs like Jehu and Joram, offering them wise counsel and divine strategies to govern with justice and righteousness. His influence helped shape policies and decisions that promoted justice and peace in the kingdom, reflecting the true essence of servant leadership. Elisha's life was marked by unwavering integrity and deep dedication to serving God and the people. He lived a simple life, focused on his prophetic duties and the well-being of the community. His humility and willingness to help, regardless of status or circumstances, inspired many to follow his example of devotion and altruism. Elisha constantly demonstrated his generosity and compassion through concrete actions. Whether distributing food during the famine, healing the sick, or resurrecting the dead, he showed a heart full of love and care. His ability to see and respond to others' needs, even amidst his own limitations, exemplified the true essence of faith in action. Elisha's legacy as Israel's spiritual leader is a lasting testimony of devotion, faith, and divine power. His life and ministry left an indelible mark on biblical history, serving as a source of inspiration for future generations. The miracles he performed continue to be remembered as examples of what can be achieved when living a life dedicated to God. Elisha's influence transcended his time, inspiring later prophets and spiritual leaders to continue God's work with the same passion and integrity. His stories are told and retold as lessons in faith, courage, and perseverance, reminding us of the importance of maintaining trust in God even in the most difficult circumstances. Imagine a vibrant village in Israel, where the sound of prayers and Elisha's words resonate through narrow streets. Men and women of all ages gather around the prophet, eager to hear his words of wisdom and witness his miracles. The atmosphere is filled with expectation and hope as Elisha, in his simple tunic and serene gaze, prepares to perform another divine act. Visualize Elisha walking through the hills of Israel, with his faithful followers by his side, facing political storms and natural crises with unwavering faith. Every step he takes is guided by God's hand, and every decision he makes is marked by wisdom beyond human understanding. Stories of his generosity, like the bread multiplication during the famine, are told around every corner, inspiring everyone around him to trust in divine providence. Elisha's life is a powerful lesson on the importance of faith, altruistic service, and trust in God. His dedication to Elijah's legacy, through acts of courage, compassion, and just leadership, demonstrates that true spiritual leadership is rooted in integrity and devotion. Elisha teaches us that no matter the challenges we face, we can achieve great feats when we place our faith in God and serve others with a generous heart. Elisha continues to inspire not only through his historical actions, but also through the lessons we can apply in our lives today. His story encourages us to face our own challenges with courage, help the needy with generosity, and lead with wisdom and justice. In a world where we are often tempted to stray from the path of righteousness, Elisha reminds us of the transformative power of faith and the importance of maintaining our devotion to God and our neighbors. Elisha's journey as Israel's spiritual leader is a testament to the continuity and depth of Elijah's legacy. His life dedicated to serving God and the people, marked by miracles and teachings, left a heritage of faith and devotion that echoes through the centuries. Elisha inspires us to live with integrity, face challenges with wisdom, and fully trust in God's power to perform miracles in our lives. May we follow Elisha's example, dedicating ourselves to serving with humility and faith, and trusting that with God by our side, we can leave a legacy of love, compassion, and miracles that will inspire future generations. Elisha's journey, from his humble call in the fields of Abel-Meholah to becoming one of Israel's most revered prophets, is a story that deeply resonates in our hearts and minds. His life is a powerful testimony of faithful service, unwavering trust in God, and the continuous manifestation of divine power for the good of those around him. Elisha teaches us the true meaning of faithful service. From the moment he left his simple life as a farmer to follow Elijah, he demonstrated unquestionable dedication to God's call. Every mission he undertook, every miracle he performed, reflected his willingness to serve without expecting recognition or reward. His generosity, as seen in the widow's oil multiplication and the bread multiplication during the famine, shows how small acts of kindness, when done with a sincere heart, can have an immense impact on people's lives. Elisha's trust in God was the cornerstone of his mission. In moments of uncertainty and adversity, he never wavered in his faith. When facing challenges, whether dealing with unfaithful kings or confronting false prophets, his trust in the divine plan guided him with wisdom and courage. This trust was not blind but rooted in a deep and personal relationship with God, where Elisha constantly sought divine guidance and strength to face each situation. Elisha's miracles were not mere displays of power but manifestations of God's love and provision for his people. The healing of Naaman, the resurrection of the Shunammite's son, and the purification of Jericho's waters are clear examples of how divine power can transform lives and restore hope. These miracles not only solved immediate problems but also served to strengthen the community's faith, constantly reminding them of God's presence and care amidst difficulties. Elisha inspires us to respond to God's call with courage and readiness. His immediate response to the initial call, "I am at your service. Lord, do not leave me to follow," was the first step towards a life of purpose and impact. Even when God's instructions were simple and challenging, like washing in the Jordan River or throwing salt into the waters, Elisha obeyed without hesitation, trusting that God had a greater plan in action. His obedience teaches us that even when God's ways seem different from our expectations, following His will can lead to extraordinary outcomes. Elisha's generosity, exemplified in the multiplication of the bread and the widow's oil, highlights the importance of sharing what we have, even when it seems little. He shows us that true wealth lies not in the accumulation of goods, but in the willingness to give and serve others. These actions not only met immediate needs but also planted seeds of faith and hope, demonstrating that with God, even the most limited resources can be multiplied to bless many. Elisha's faith in God's promises was a beacon of hope for him and those around him. Even when facing seemingly impossible situations, his trust in divine promises never faltered. This unwavering faith inspired others to trust in God as well, creating a wave of spiritual renewal and community commitment. Elisha teaches us that faith is not just believing in God when things are going well but also trusting Him in life's storms, knowing that He is faithful to fulfill His promises. Elisha's legacy continues to inspire generations of believers to follow his example of dedication, faith, and generosity. His stories are told and retold as sources of inspiration, reminding us that with God by our side, we can overcome any challenge and perform great works for the good of humanity. Elisha left an indelible mark on Israel's history, and his impact is felt to this day, serving as a constant reminder of the transformative power of faith and obedience to God. Elisha's life is a mirror in which we can see our own faith and service journeys reflected. His actions encourage us to face our challenges with courage, help the needy with generosity, and lead with wisdom and justice. Thank you for watching up to here, and don't forget to subscribe and activate the notification bell to see more content like this and stories of overcoming, motivation, and interest. Until next time.